Okay, a few things before I get started. Generally, I record all the lectures that there, and I post them on YouTube, and that there. And you probably have heard that from your classmates that that's just one of the things that I do. And the primary reason I do that is I speak with a American accent, not a Malaysian accent. Saya tidak cakap Melayu bagus. Saya malas. That there, I have been very lazy to learn Malay properly. That there, and my wife is Malaysian. She has tried several times to kind of force me into it, but I'm a stubborn old man, and that there, there's no joke. What do you call someone who can speak two languages? They're bilingual, right? That's the term. What do you call someone who can speak three languages? Trilingual. What do you call someone who can speak only one language? An American. That's there. Americans are notorious for not being able to learn foreign languages. The British are better because they live close to places like France and Germany, and in Europe. The U.S. is an isolated country that it's got two large oceans on each side of it, so there's no close neighbors. Their number one neighbor that to the north is Canada, which also speaks English, right there, and their number two neighbor to the south is Mexico, which very few people intertwine, go back and forth to Mexico, and that's not necessarily true. I have my youngest son is married to a Mexican, and he lives 30 miles from the Mexican border. So if anybody should be speaking Spanish, Mexican Spanish, it should be my son. Unfortunately, he's got the same problem I do. He essentially lives in, the outskirts of Tijuana. San Diego is just north of the border with Mexico, and Tijuana is the large city on the other side in Mexico. And his wife's actually born in Tijuana, so his wife and her whole family speaks Spanish. His father-in-law speaks very little English, his mother-in-law okay, and yet my son doesn't speak hardly any Spanish. So he's in the same situation as I am. We joke about the fact that he can't speak Spanish, and his mother-in-law doesn't speak very good English. I don't speak Malay. My father-in-law and my mother-in-law, when they were alive, didn't speak English. Unfortunately, my mother-in-law had Alzheimer's, so she would sit and speak to me for half an hour at a time in Malay without realizing that I didn't understand a word she was saying. But that was okay. She also thought she was talking to her brother and not to her son-in-law. So, Alzheimer's is one of those diseases that it's very sad, but sometimes the individuals with Alzheimer's can be quite entertaining. So, that's there. Okay, back to, I will be creating a Facebook page for this class at there. And I use Facebook for several reasons. I'm supposed to use the, and I'm yelling because there's a microphone here on the PC that's recording this. I'm supposed to be posting everything up on the UniKL educational website, and if I ask you to raise your hands, and I'm not going to, how many people check that on a daily basis? Hardly anybody, right? But how many people get notices on Facebook if I post a notice saying that class is canceled or moved to a different room? There. So I've just discovered that Facebook is actually a little bit better way of getting in touch with everyone. At first, and I've got mixed feelings on Facebook. I don't post a lot of stuff, and I have a separate Facebook account that I use for personal. And I don't post a lot of stuff. I've got a sister, the one who's coming Thursday, who does everything on Facebook and Facebook Messenger. She seems to live on that stuff. And then she always wonders why she's got squabbles with family members. And my computer if I don't keep that there, decides to shut the screen off. That there. So Facebook is kind of an interesting up there. But I'm also 61 years old, so I didn't grow up in the era of Facebook. Right there. You know, so I grew up in the era of email. I live by emails and that there. So I tend to email more than I do anything else with people. I'm not quite of the era of, you know, phone calls, and I'm not really into the instant messaging thing. And I'm not into instant messaging because my right hand doesn't work very well, and trying to use my finger on my phone is actually a pain in the neck for me. I have many misspellings and that there, and it's because I can't use my right hand very well. It's better than it was. So, okay, as far as grades goes, I'm not sure how I'm going to do it. You know, I got scolded last time because I gave too many high grades. I mean, students don't like to hear that, right? But I got a phone call saying I gave the entire computer programming class A's last semester, and you know that the committee questioned that there. So as a result, in the robotics course last semester, there was probably one C and a couple of B's that there, and the rest were pretty much A's. I'm not really a hard grader that there. You know, again, some of it comes from the fact that I spent 30 years at Purdue University in the U.S. that there, and I was a department chair for a number of years back there, about 5 years, and so I've been around for a long time, and I've got mixed feelings on the goal of education from what that there, and you know, I don't know how far I'll get today in the actual topic, but since it's going to be weeks before we meet, I may as well just get on my soapbox early today. But to me, the goal of education is to teach people how to learn. You know, that there. I'm not so concerned that you learn specific skills in a course. That there. And the reason I'm not so concerned that you learn specific skills is because those are going to change as time goes on. Now, there are some specific skills I will teach, and there are some specific pieces of knowledge I'm going to require that you know, and particularly, you know, different types of robot, you know, joints, arms, you know, how robots work. You know, I'll also get in some of the ethical issues of robotics, some of the social issues of robotics, because those are as important as the engineering side of things. But engineers don't work in a vacuum. We work in society. And I will venture to say that 90%, well, I wouldn't say 90%, we'll say 70%. And that's just a guess. 90% is probably pretty much true in the U.S. of engineering students 15 years after they graduate have either moved on to management or other careers. You know, 10 to 30% of engineering graduates are not sitting, you know, behind a computer terminal, you know, doing circuit drawings and doing building layouts or doing car designs, you know, engine mount designs, or, you know, I'm talking about engineers in general, not just electrical, or writing software for embedded systems, which is the world I came from. They're either managing does that, or they're supervising people, or they're, you know, opening their own consulting company. You know, they're doing things like that. And the junior people are the ones that are doing the design work anymore. And there's two reasons. One is engineering, and in particular, the area that I'm from, which is the embedded microcontroller, microprocessors, which is where robotics grew out of, right there, changes very rapidly. Now, when I was going to college, computer programming was on punch cards on a mainframe computer, and it took you probably 3 hours to do one iteration of a program. By the time you stood in line, got a key punch machine, typed out all your cards, put them in order, fed them into the machine, waited, because they had a card reader, you had to feed them into the card reader, go get something to eat while the computer processed it, go open the program out of, get the print out from your mailbox, go through and try to find your errors, and then repeat the process until your program ran error-free. Now you sit down with a computer, with a text editor, and each iteration is you change one line and you hit compile run, and you're done. There's no waiting time from the time that you make a change to the time you see how well it works, right there. So programming has changed drastically. When I first graduated from college back in the 80s, that there. So we're talking, it's now, we're talking 40 years now, roughly, getting close to 35, 40 years out there from the time I got, that's there. Cell phones were things that you carried in a bag. They were about the size of my knapsack, right there. Well, in the States we call them cell phones. Here you call them hand phones, right there. So, and now, of course, they fit into your pocket. They're small. They've actually, now the trend is to make them bigger because they also replace your desktop computer. That there. It used to be that people would use your desktop computer for everything. Now it's their hand phone. It's got their Facebook. It's got their email. It's got their instant messaging. It's got their web browser. It's got everything. It's got the internet. So, the world has changed drastically from there. And what's changed more than anything else has been electrical and electronic engineering. That has been the area that has changed more than any other type of technology or anything in life. If you look at an automobile, you go down and you look at, say, a brand new Myvi. Peradua just introduced a new Myvi last year. And you look at the difference between the Myvi that they introduced 2 months ago or however long ago, and the first Myvi that was introduced. I mean, the Myvi's been around 10 years now. What's that? Well, we'll say 10 years. And you look at a Myvi from 10 years ago and you look at one today, the biggest difference is in the electronics in the car. So the engine is still an internal combustion engine. It hasn't changed. Now, what may have changed may be that it's got electronic timing and ignition, it's got electronic fuel injection, but that's the electronics has changed. The engine controller is now computerized control. The diagnostics is now computer. The engine itself is still a big hunk of cast aluminum. I think they make them out of aluminum blocks, right there, with 4 cylinders that go up and down, with rings that keep the oil from getting in, getting into the combustion chamber from that there. They've got a crankshaft that takes the power from the pistons and sends that to the transmission that shifts the gears. All these various things have not changed very much. That there, now they've got a backup camera to where you can see where you're going when you're in reverse. They've got LED headlights and turn signals. Again, it's the electronics that's changed in the car. You go into a hospital room. What's changed from a hospital room 30 years ago to today? 30 years ago, there wasn't a whole lot of electronics that there. Today, unfortunately, I had the experience last April of spending, a week or so as a guest at Calica Hospital, and I got to understand things such as electronic infusion machines and heart monitors and all those various things. But the electronics in a hospital room has changed. Surgery, now they use cameras and go in with very small instruments and do surgery using orthoscopic cameras. Where before, they would, my wife just had a shoulder surgery done probably 6 months ago. That's there. And they did it with using a camera and orthoscopic equipment, where 20 years ago they would have sliced her shoulder wide open. And so the computer is what's changed. Electronics is what's changed society. You are in a generation that never knew life before Google, practically. You grew up with Google right there. When I grew up, we had black and white televisions, and we had a single phone in a house with a wire connected to it, and only very rich people had the bag phones, the average person that's there. If you wanted information, you went to a place that you don't see much of anymore, and that was called the library. And when you wanted to understand something, you used books right there. I still read books, but I don't know. Oh, that's there. But even the books have changed now. Now I read something called I use a Kindle, which is an electronic book, and it's got, I don't know what have I got in here. I just finished the book last night on it, or 2 nights ago, but I think I got 200 and some books on my Kindle. Right there. $255 books. So I've got 255 books in this little device right there that I can carry with me and read books on it. So even books have changed. They're the same books, a lot of them are the same books that we used to get from the library. Now I'll have some books that I'll be posting up on the PDF books I post will be on the e-learning site. I won't post those on Facebook because some of those are copyrighted. That's there. So I won't post those on Facebook, but they'll be on the e-learning site. But they'll be PDF books. But one of the differences between you as a student and myself as a student was that I used to go into the library and grab a book, a handful of books off the shelf, and sit down at a study table. Check them out. Actually, I smoked a pipe on a regular basis back then when I was a student. So I'd go out to the smoking lounge outside the library with my pipe. I still smoke a pipe on occasion out there, but not for morning and night. And I'd sit there and I'd spend hours going through books and taking notes from them. Now you sit down with Google and you do an internet search, right? Out there. Unfortunately, some of you will probably get points taken off this semester if you do a cut and paste from Google. You have to rephrase things. You can't just cut and paste from Google. Right there. But learning has changed. So, not books. So my job as your professor out there is not necessarily to teach you about robotics, but to teach you how to learn about robotics. Because everything I teach you today is going to change. And that's where I was getting into this whole discussion of change and how things have changed over the last 30, 40 years that I've been working as an engineer and a faculty member, and the 60 years of that I've been alive. I had a conversation with my father shortly before he passed away about 7 or 8 years ago, and we were talking about how much life has changed since he was a child. He grew up in the days that one kid in the neighborhood had a television set, and he remembers when TVs came out, and then people used to clamor around a big vacuum tube radio. And he grew up during World War II. He was actually born in the Great Depression in the U.S. So he went through all that. since I've been alive, and you know, wasn't quite as old as my dad when he passed away, but you know, the fact is that, you know, I've seen TVs progress from the early color television sets that were the size of, you know, they were probably you know, 2/3 of a meter to a meter tall and about a meter wide, you know, large television sets, to now, you know, color monitors that'll fit on your watch. That there, if you look at the Apple, you know, the Apple Watch, you know, you could now make phone calls with some of the watches. When I was a kid, we had a cartoon called Dick Tracy, where they had the watch phones were that there, and that was science fiction back then. You know, I remember the very first Star Trek that came out in the 1960s. And for those of you who aren't familiar, Star Trek, it's a American science fiction, you know, TV show. They made a lot of movies after, but the very early ones was in the 1960s. So when you look at the change in technology from back then to today, what was considered science fiction as a child to me is now reality for you, right there. So everything's going to change. You know, there's been more change in lifestyle in the last 50 years in my lifetime than there has been in probably all of history. That there over an average of 200-300 years. You know, if you want to look at the differences between how little life changed back, you know, Muhammad lived, and I'm going to use, you know, not the Islamic dates, but the Common Era dates. Muhammad lived around 635 or so, Common Era, right? So that would have been about 630 years after Isa was on Earth. And if you look at the lifestyles that were on Earth during the time of Isa, which is which is Common Era 0. You know, that was the advent of the Christian calendar, the Gregorian calendar, and you look at the lifestyle of Muhammad and his tribesmen during his time, the early Muslims, things didn't change much. You know, they were still going and getting water from the wells, carrying them in buckets. They were still cooking over open fires. They were still building huts out of the same materials. So when you're looking at 600 years, very little difference right there. You know, society didn't start changing much until really the advent of gunpowder and machinery and things like that. And you know, you're talking in the 1400s, another 700 years after Muhammad, is when you started seeing changes in Europe back there. Now there was a lot of changes during the time of the Romans and then the Islamic period. There was a lot, you know, running water and those types of things. But then society just stopped for a while, right there. You look at the 1400s from there on. Again, I'm using Common Era. Not much changed until recent years. That's there. So, you know, but when we look at the last 200 years, 300 years, huge changes. You know, the automobile, when was the automobile out? 1890s, 125, 130 years ago. Right there. And you look at everything prior to the automobile was animal driven. You know, you had the railroad, but the railroad, you're still talking, you know, early 1800s, right there. You know, so the railroad, you're only talking, you know, what, 225 years with the railroad, and society is how long? Before the railroad, if you wanted to get from point A to point B, was a long trip. You know, the steam engine changed everything. That's there. So, but if you look at the last 50 years, 50 years ago, there was no internet. That there. I remember as a graduate student getting my first email address, hack@cvax.ipfw.indiana.edu or something like that. Then it finally, now it's just hack@ipfw.edu right there. I still have that same address, that there. I don't use it here. Here I use this guy at unikal.edu.my, but if you sent something to hack@ipfw.edu, I would get it. That's my old email address. It's still valid, but that was we're talking 35 years ago, right there. And at that time, nobody used email. Now hardly anybody uses email again. Email has become obsolete. Now it's messaging. So, okay, enough with my background out there, but it just kind of goes back to, sometimes you'll see that I don't concentrate so much on material as I do the thinking process right there. So, all right, I'm going to just kind of jump here. I'm going to go through some slides. That's what we're supposed to do. They pay us to go through slides right there. And I'm not going to dwell too much on these up there. This is a book that I stole the slides from. It's not a bad book. It's a little bit deeper than I want to go into. There is a book specified on the syllabus. Don't even think about looking for it. That book starts off with four-dimensional differential equations, differential equations in the matrix form, that they're with a 4x4 matrix right there. More math than I think we want to get into. That there. So again, as we're looking at this right here, we're looking at the fact that robots, actually the earliest robots that we could think of was probably something like a crane, which is a machine that there. Again, when we're looking at this picture, and I've got better pictures right there, but what this picture here shows, and I forgot this, I can't use some projectors, I can't, the PowerPoint pen right there, I can use this right here. But this is a robotic arm that's coming over, and it's sealing the windows on a truck. That's what it's doing. We'll look at several videos on industrial robots. That's what we're supposed to be teaching in this class, is industrial robots right there. Unfortunately, we don't have any industrial robots. We've got one downstairs, but it doesn't work. We'll go out and look at it. That there. We'll talk about that there. We've got some toy robots that you'll get a chance to do some labs and play with. That there. I call them toys because they're little servo motors and you can't do a whole lot with them right there. But we'll talk about how they work right there. Okay, you'll find various things. What is robot? Random House Dictionary, that there, and I didn't really look at these slides too well beforehand. It's a machine that resembles a human and does mechanical tasks, routine tasks on commands. Now that's when we look at there. That's not really true, because most robots don't resemble humans. Right there. This is the humanoid robot, and we'll talk a little bit about the difference between humanoid robots and industrial robots. An industrial robot is usually one that has reprogrammable, multifunctional, manipulator design to move materials, parts, tools, or specialized devices. It's a programmable machine that does work. It's probably the easiest thing to do that there. Now, robots are used for various things. Ideally, in most cases, robots are supposed to replace or augment human labor. Trivial question, and we'll be on the final. But what was the first job eliminated by a robot? Anybody got a clue? The piano player. the player piano. And this was back in the U.S. when being a piano player was actually a very dangerous job. Because most piano players were in saloons where people carried guns. And if someone didn't like the music you're playing, or you weren't a very good piano player, you might get shot at. So it was a dangerous job. So they developed a machine that had a roll that had various holes in it, and each hole would represent a key on the keyboard, and this roll would go through with a like a watch mechanism, a little wind-up motor that would then pull this roll through, and every time there was a hole, it would play a note. So you would replace the piano player with the robotic piano player, or the player piano, right there. So it's just kind of a trivial question. It's not that you don't have that TV show here called Jeopardy, which is a TV show in the States where they ask all kinds of difficult questions that really mean nothing in life. I always talk about, if you're good at Jeopardy, you've got a brain full of worthless knowledge. So knowing that the piano player was the first robotic machine, or first job replaced by a machine, it's kind of worthless knowledge until you start thinking about the history of robots, and the fact that we're going back to the 1850s, 1860s, where the concept of replacing a human being sitting at a piano, playing the piano, with a machine that would automatically play the piano was a concept. And again, going back to the fact that piano players were a dangerous job, it was hard for saloons to get people willing to play pianos. It's hard to find them. So when we look at robots today, most of the jobs that they've eliminated, I would say, are jobs that humans don't want. Right there. And again, my goal is not to finish these slides today. Matter of fact, I won't go finish these slides. But we'll go back to next week. One of the early jobs I had when I was like 16, 17 years old, I worked in a factory that made loudspeakers, for cars, most people live today in the world of headphones, right? But you're young people, especially the young guys, you like loud stereos in your cars, right? You play music in your cars and you use speakers. And back then, speakers required large magnets. And my job at that time, and it was the shortest job I ever had. I hated the job. I worked there for 4 hours and I quit. But my job literally was to sit on what I call a bar stool, but a high footstool, and take magnets from a table and place them on speakers as they went by on the assembly line. Pretty darn boring work. And I could use a few adjectives other than the word darn to describe how I felt about this job at the time. One of the reasons I went to lunch and never went back, right there, was now you would never have a human being sit there and pick up pieces of magnetic material and set them over onto a speaker coil. You would have a robotic actuator do that as they go by. Or you would have something that would have them and just do it much, much faster, right there. But that was a job that, as a human being, I didn't want to do it. I mean, it was about the most boring job that you could think about. That's there. But most jobs, when people talk about automation, a lot of the jobs that we are eliminating are jobs that most people don't want to do anyway. Now, there are jobs that people wanted because they needed to make money and pay, buy groceries and pay their rent. But when we look at robotics, one of the things it does do is it eliminates jobs And a lot of the jobs that it does replace are jobs that people don't want. A lot of the jobs that they replace are dirty jobs. That's here. So that's there. So getting back to here, a manipulator, and we're going to have to come back to this topic anyway, or industrial robot is composed of a series of links connected via joints. We'll look at all the various joints and how a robot's put together. We'll get doing that there. These actuators, we'll use the term actuator a great deal, and we'll use the term sensor. Right there is how we manipulate the robotic arm or whatever the robot is doing in order to do the job. Right there. So, there. And I think I'm gonna just kind of stop at this point. That's there. This is our first class. Nobody really expects to get much done the first week anyway. But it's kind of an introduction of where we're going, is that we've got various types of robots that we're going to look at. And as I said, I'm more interested in teaching you how to learn some of this here. I will probably have one or two essay papers turned in this class in terms of forcing you to do a little bit of research. Although I can't force you into a library, you'll probably do your research on the internet. That there. But you have to at least reword it and paraphrase that there. Can't that there. But the key thing is forcing to learn how to look for information. Right there. Right there. So we get into the classifications of the robots. These are also various terms. And I'm not going to go through these now because in a week you're going to forget them anyway. So let me just kind of, that's there. So, that's there. Let me stop this. Yeah, see, most of my lectures, I should point out, will be between 50 minutes and 75 minutes, right there. Now, what might happen is we're scheduled for 2 hours, and my average, we're supposed to be here till what, 12 o'clock, something like that, right there. What I may do later on is if I end up canceling one class a week on a regular basis or so, which I'm hoping not to do, we may meet twice on Monday or Friday or Thursday and have a 50-minute lecture, take a 10, 15-minute break, and then come back and have another 50-minute lecture. Just have 2 lectures in the same day, right there. Or we'll do both a Monday, Thursday lecture. That's there. So one of the sayings that we have in the U.S. is that the mind can only absorb what, and we don't use a different word, but what the backside can absorb, can withstand. And most people have an attention span of about an hour at most. That's there. And so I just realized that after 30 years of teaching, actually more than that, 33 years now at this point, that I've been teaching, that there is that if I get much beyond the hour and 15 minutes, I look around the room and I see a lot of glazed eyes. I see people dozing off. So there's no point in going beyond that. I know a lot of the lecturers here that they go by the rules, and Malaysia's a funny place. Some people stick to the rules regardless how stupid they are. Then some people will ignore the rules no matter how much sense they make, So you got people that will lecture for an hour and 45 minutes, even though they know the last 30 to 45 minutes is a waste of time. But then they'll get on a motorcycle and they'll run red lights and almost get killed on a regular basis. So some rules they'll follow religiously, to the point of, you have to do it, you have to do it. To other rules that really are common sense. I mean, that they're, like I said, side note is, the mom and dad both wearing the helmets and the 3 kids on the motorcycles with no helmets is always the one that cracks me up. That there, I mean, I understand helmets are expensive for children and they grow and, it's that there. But if you're going to wear a helmet, then by all means put something on your children's head. That there. I mean, because they don't bounce any better than you do. That there. at there, so they're a little bit more private. But I will do the Facebook page probably this afternoon or tomorrow. That's there. I don't know if this is the wrong Facebook page. That's my at there. I have there's no internet connection. You'll oh, I'm not going to worry about. As I said, I've got 2 Facebook pages. Log out. The purplish one is the one that you want to look for me. That's there. And matter of fact, let me go ahead and create the group real quick here. If I can remember how to do it, it's been a while. Groups. And our group is going to be robotics and automation. January 2018, and keep that in mind that right there, and I have to add myself, otherwise it won't let me. I add myself to the group, otherwise it won't let me create the group. Right there. One of the reasons I have to have 2 accounts is when I create the group, I have to have right there and right there. And so right there, I'll add a post right there, but again, this is the group right there, and I'm going to just go ahead and just simply say no class on, what's the date this Friday? The 26th, right? 26th. Okay. And well, I hate this when it does this. And there we go. Okay, so I've created the group, so just ask to be added to the group. You can search for it. Usually someone finds it pretty quickly, and then everyone else finds it right there. The other groups here, I'm going to change those right there. Yeah, see someone, okay, yeah, someone's already asked to join the group, so right there. And actually, once you can approve each other's once I've set the group up. It's a closed group because sometimes I will post some things that there. And it's funny, I will get requests from all over the world when it comes to that there, but there, I don't know what picture I'll post up there, but usually they have nothing to do with the class right there. So, okay, let me go ahead and stop the recording. The links